Chapter 1. The price of bread. The rain had turned the cobblestones into black mirrors, reflecting nothing but the dim glow of gas lamps that flickered like dying stars. Elena pressed her back against the cold stone wall of the bakery, her breath coming in short, visible puffs. The bread tucked inside her coat was still warm, stolen from the loading dock when the baker's assistant had turned away. 3 days. Her mother hadn't eaten in 3 days. She didn't feel the cold anymore. Numbness had become her constant companion since the scandal that destroyed her father's name and left them with nothing but debts and whispers. The trial had been swift, the verdict brutal. Embezzlement, fraud, words that clung to their family like rot. Never mind that her father had been framed by his business partner. Never mind that he'd hanged himself in their garden before he could speak the truth. The city had already decided who they were, fallen gentry. Untouchable, unworthy of mercy, Elena pulled her threadbare shawl tighter and stepped into the narrow alley that would take her home. The streets of Ashwick were never truly safe after dark, but the wealthy districts where she used to walk freely were forbidden to her now. She kept to the edges, to the forgotten places where even thieves had little to steal. She didn't see the child until she nearly tripped over her, a small figure huddled against a doorway, knees drawn up, face hidden in shadow. Elena stopped, her heart lurching. The girl couldn't have been more than 7, dressed in rags that might have once been a nightgown. Her bare feet were gray with cold. Are you lost? Elena knelt despite the ache in her own empty stomach, despite the bread she needed to bring home. The girl's face lifted slowly, and Elena saw hunger carved into features too young to wear it. I have a toy, the child whispered, holding up something small and wooden. A carved horse, its paint chipped away. Please, sir, buy my toy. Mama hasn't eaten in 3 days. The words were a mirror, and Elena felt something crack inside her chest. I'm not a sir, she said gently, reaching out. And I don't have money, sweetheart. But I have, she does. The voice came from above, smooth as silk drawn over a blade. Elena's head snapped up, and the breath left her lungs. A man stood on the rooftop ledge 3 stories above them, perfectly balanced, impossibly still. The rain didn't touch him. It curved around his silhouette like he existed in a space separate from the world. His coat was black, tailored with a precision that spoke of wealth older than the cobblestones beneath her feet. His face was beautiful in the way ancient statues were beautiful, cold, perfect, inhuman, and his eyes were wrong. They caught the lamplight and threw it back like a cat's. Colorless and depthless all at once, Elena's hand found the child's shoulder, pulling her close. We want no trouble. Trouble has already found you. He stepped off the ledge. There was no jump, no fall. One moment he was above, the next he was standing before them, close enough that Elena could see the rain droplets suspended in the air around him, as if time itself hesitated in his presence. She scrambled backward. The child clutched against her, but the wall stopped her escape. The girl is bait, he said, his voice carrying an accent she couldn't place. Something old, continental, shaped by centuries rather than years. House Valois uses children to draw out prey. They've been hunting in the shaded quarter for weeks. I don't understand. You don't need to. His gaze flicked past her, and something shifted in his expression. A tightening around his eyes, a barely perceptible turn of his head. They're here. Elena heard them then. Footsteps, multiple sets, moving too quickly to smoothly. Shadows detached themselves from the alley's entrance. 3 figures, moving with the same unnatural grace as the man before her. Lord Kale, one of them said. A woman with hair like spilled ink and a smile too wide for her face. The council did not authorize your presence in this district. You overstep. The council, Kale replied, his tone unchanged, has no authority over where I walk. Then you won't mind if we collect what's ours. The woman's eyes fixed on Elena, and hunger blazed their ancient, insatiable wrong. The girl was promised. And the woman, she smells of grief, fresh grief. It makes the blood so much sweeter. Elena's arms tightened around the child, her mind struggling to make sense of words that belonged in nightmares. Blood. They were talking about blood. The woman is under my protection, Kale said. Since when? Since now. The shift was instantaneous. The 3 figures moved as one, blurring with impossible speed. Kale's hand shot out, catching Elena's wrist, and the world lurched sideways. She felt herself lifted, the child still pressed against her chest, and then they were moving faster than falling, faster than thought. The alley became a streak of shadow and lamplight, the rain a solid wall of pressure against her face. They stopped on a rooftop half a mile away. Elena collapsed to her knees, gasping, the child crying silently against her shoulder. Kale stood at the edge, watching the streets below with the stillness of a predator. "What are you?" Elena managed. He didn't turn. "The word you're looking for is vampire." The bread had fallen somewhere in the chaos. Her mother was still hungry, and Elena was kneeling on a rooftop beside a monster who had just claimed her as his. The rain continued to fall, indifferent to the moment. Her life had irrevocably changed. Chapter 2. Threshold of Shadows. The child had stopped crying, but her silence was worse. She trembled against Elena's chest, small fingers clutching the stolen bread that Elena had somehow managed to keep hold of through the impossible flight across rooftops. The carved horse lay abandoned somewhere in the alley below, along with every rational explanation for what had just happened. Vampire. The word sat in Elena's mind like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples through everything she thought she knew about the world. Fairy tales. Ghost stories whispered by firelight. Not real things. Not men who moved like liquid shadow and spoke with the weight of centuries. Kale remained at the roof's edge, his back to her, rain sliding off his coat without leaving a trace. He hadn't moved in 5 minutes. Didn't shift his weight. Didn't breathe that she could see. "She needs shelter," Elena said finally, her voice hoarse. The child's skin was ice cold, her lips tinged blue. "And food. And she's already dead." The words were matter of fact, empty of cruelty or comfort. Elena's arms tightened reflexively. "She's breathing. Her heart is slowing." Kale turned, and his eyes, that wrong luminous gray, fixed on the child with something that might have been sorrow in a creature capable of such a thing. House Valois doesn't use living bait. They turn children just enough to make them traceable, controllable. When their usefulness ends, the transformation completes, or they simply stop. Elena looked down at the small face pressed against her shoulder. The girl's skin was too pale, veins visible beneath like dark threads. Her breathing had grown shallow, each exhale a little weaker than the last. There must be something. There is. Kale crossed the distance between them in a single fluid step, crouching to their level. This close, Elena could see the inhuman perfection of him, skin to smooth, features too precise, as if carved rather than born. "I can finish what they started. Make the transformation complete. She would live, as what you are, as what I am." He didn't flinch from it. "Or I can end it cleanly. She'll feel nothing. Sleep and then silence. Those aren't choices." Elena's voice broke. "That's murder or damnation. That's mercy or mercy. She's already gone, girl. I'm simply asking which door you'd prefer she walk through." The child stirred, her eyes fluttering open. They were starting to change, the brown bleeding into something paler, cloudier. "Mama," she whispered. "I want Mama." Elena's throat closed. She thought of her own mother, waiting in their single rented room, hunger eating her from the inside. She thought of her father swinging from the garden oak, choosing oblivion over dishonor. She thought of all the ways the world ground people into dust and called it justice. "If you transform her," Elena said slowly, "she'll be alone. A child, forever a child, in your world, not alone." Kale's gaze hadn't left the girl's face. "House Mordain takes foundlings. They would raise her, teach her, give her purpose. It's not the life she was meant for, but it's life. And if I choose the other way, then I grant her what I cannot have." An ending. The rain drummed against the rooftop, counting seconds. The child's heartbeat was a fading rhythm beneath Elena's palm. She had no right to make this choice, no wisdom to guide her. She was just a girl who'd stolen bread and stumbled into a nightmare. But the child's eyes were on her, trusting, waiting. "Save her," Elena whispered. "However, you can. Just save her." Kale nodded once. He gathered the child from Elena's arms with surprising gentleness, cradling her small form against his chest. "Look away." Elena didn't. She watched as Kale bit into his own wrist, dark blood welling up to dark, almost black. She watched as he pressed the wound to the child's lips, murmuring words in a language that predated the cobblestones and gas lamps and rain-soaked city. The girl drank, and color flooded back into her cheeks. Her heartbeat steadied, then accelerated, then became something else entirely, a rhythm both slower and stronger than human pulse. When it was done, the child slept peacefully, curled in Kale's arms like he was safety itself. "She'll wake tomorrow night," he said. "House Mordain will collect her. She won't remember you, which is kinder than the alternative. And me?" Elena's voice was steadier than she felt. What happens to the woman under your protection? That depends. Kale studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. House Valois won't forget you. They'll mark you as mine, which makes you both protected and endangered. You can't return to your old life. The moment you step into familiar streets, they'll find you. I have a mother. She's ill. She needs me. Then she needs you alive. Kale's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes, a calculation, or perhaps a memory. I can offer you shelter. My residence is warded against other houses. You'll be safe there while we determine what House Valois wants badly enough to break hunting protocols. I don't trust you. Wise. He shifted the sleeping child, preparing to move. But trust isn't required. Only pragmatism. You've seen what we are now. That knowledge alone makes you a target. Stay with me, and you might survive long enough to return to your mother. Refuse, and House Valois will drain you in an alley and leave your body for the rats. Elena stood on, shaking legs, the bread still clutched in one hand. Her coat was soaked through. Her future was ashes. And a vampire was offering her sanctuary with all the warmth of a business transaction. One night, she said. I stay one night, then you help me get word to my mother. Agreed. Kale extended his free hand. Hold on. The journey will be unpleasant. She took his hand. His skin was cool, solid, and far too strong. The world blurred again, rooftops and streets and rain becoming a single smeared painting. When it stopped, they stood before iron gates that opened onto a house that looked like it had been sleeping for centuries. Kale carried the child toward the door. Elena followed, crossing the threshold into his world. Behind them, the gates closed with a sound like a crypt ceiling shut. Chapter 3. The House of Thorns' house was a monument to forgetting. Elena stood in the entrance hall, rain pooling at her feet on marble floors that gleamed like black ice. Portraits lined the walls, faces rendered in oils dark with age, eyes that seemed to follow her movement. Candelabras held candles that burned without flickering, their flames unnaturally still. The air smelled of old wood and older secrets, and beneath it all, something metallic that made her think of blood. Kale had disappeared through a side door with the child, leaving Elena alone with instructions to wait here. 5 minutes had passed, then 10. She counted her heartbeats to keep from counting the eyes in the paintings. When he returned, he'd changed his coat for a simpler one, dark wool without ornamentation. He moved through the shadows like he was part of them, and Elena noticed for the first time that he cast no reflection in the polished floor. The girl is settled, he said. House Mordain will collect her at dusk tomorrow. She won't wake before then. You keep saying that. House Mordain, House Valois, like their governments, they are. Kale gestured down a corridor lined with more portraits, more candles. The 5 great houses rule the night. Mordain, Valois, Cres's, Thorn, and mine House Vex. Each controls territory, resources, and the vampires within their bloodlines. We have treaties, laws, consequences for breaking them. Elena followed, her wet shoes squeaking against marble. And House Valois broke the law tonight? They hunted in my district without permission, used a turned child as bait, targeted a human under ambiguous circumstances. He paused at a heavy oak door, producing a key from his pocket. Any one of those violations would warrant council inquiry. All 3 together suggest either desperation or declaration of intent. Intent to what? War. The word hung in the air like smoke. Kale unlocked the door and pushed it open, revealing a library that stole Elena's breath. Books lined every wall from floor to ceiling, thousands of them. Leather-bound and ancient, their spines marked in languages she didn't recognize. A fire burned in a massive hearth, the first source of genuine warmth she'd felt all night. Leather chairs sat arranged before it, and a desk occupied one corner, covered in maps and documents weighted down with strange silver instruments. You'll stay here tonight, Kale said, moving to the fire. There's a washroom through that door. Clean clothes in the wardrobe, they'll be too large, but dry. Food in the cabinet if you're hungry. You keep human food? I keep many things. He didn't elaborate, instead studying the fire with an expression she couldn't read. The wards on this house are absolute. Nothing enters without my permission. You're safe here, safe in a vampire's house. Elena laughed, the sound edged with hysteria. Do you hear how mad that sounds? I hear how true it is. Kale finally looked at her, and the firelight turned his eyes to molten silver. You're afraid of me. Good. Fear keeps humans alive. But I'm not your enemy tonight, Elena Thorn. She froze. How do you know my name? Your father's trial was public. The scandal, memorable. Something shifted in his expression. He was innocent. The words hit like a physical blow. How could you possibly? Because I was there. Kale turned fully to face her, and for the first time, she saw emotion crack through his marble composure. In the gallery, I watched the proceedings. I saw the evidence, noticed the inconsistencies. Your father's business partner, Marcus Holden, had been in House Valois' pocket for years. They needed Thorn Shipping's routes for their operations. When your father refused to look the other way, they destroyed him. Elena's knees went weak. She gripped the back of a chair, the room tilting. You knew. All this time you knew, and you said nothing? What could I say? Who would believe a vampire's testimony? His voice was cold again, distant. The human world has its own justice system. I don't interfere. Unless it's convenient. Bitterness flooded her throat. Unless there's something in it for you. Yes, he didn't deny it. I saved you tonight because House Valois hunting in my territory is an insult I can't ignore. The fact that you're a thorn is a complication. One that might prove useful. Useful? How? Kale moved to his desk, unrolling one of the maps. Elena saw Ashwick laid out in intricate detail, districts marked with symbols she didn't understand. Your father's shipping routes connected 3 ports. Those ports now belong to Holden, who feeds information to House Valois. If I can prove Valois orchestrated your father's fall, I can bring charges before the council, weaken their position, force them to withdraw from territories they've been slowly consuming. You want revenge. Elena's hands clenched into fists. You want to use my family's destruction as ammunition in your vampire politics. I want justice. There's a difference. Not to me. She took a step toward him, fury burning through fear. My father is dead. My mother is dying by inches in a rented room that smells like sickness and shame. Your justice won't bring him back. It won't undo what they did to us. No. Kale's eyes met hers, and she saw centuries in them, centuries of losses and compromises and cold calculations. But it might prevent them from doing it to others. House Valois has ruined 43 human families in the past decade. 43 men and women driven to suicide or exile. Your father was just one name on a very long list. The number staggered her. 43. 43 families like hers. Destroyed for convenience, or profit, or some immortal creature's passing whim. Why should I believe you? Her voice cracked. Why should I trust anything you say? You shouldn't. Kale rolled the map back up with precise movements. But you're here, in my house, under my protection. Whether you trust me or not, our interests align. House Valois wants you dead or turned. I want them exposed. Help me, and I'll help you. Refuse, and I'll still keep you alive. But your mother will continue to waste away, wondering if you're dead in a ditch somewhere. It wasn't a threat. It was simply truth, laid bare with the bluntness of someone who'd stopped softening reality centuries ago. Elena looked at the fire, at the books, at the vampire who'd saved her life for reasons that had nothing to do with kindness. Her father was gone. Her old life was ashes. But her mother was still breathing, still waiting. What do you need from me? She asked quietly. Tomorrow night, Kale said. We'll start with the truth. Chapter 4. Dawn and Duskalina didn't sleep. She'd found the washroom marble and brass, impossibly luxurious, and cleaned the city's grime from her skin with water that ran hot at a touch. The clothes in the wardrobe were men's shirts and trousers, soft with age, smelling faintly of cedar. She'd chosen the smallest shirt, rolling the sleeves to her elbows, and sat by the fire, trying to reconcile the impossible with the undeniable. Vampires were real. Her father had been murdered by them. And she was sheltering in the house of one who claimed to want justice. The food in the cabinet had been simple bread, cheese, dried fruit, but it was more than she'd seen in weeks. She'd eaten mechanically, feeling guilty for every bite, while her mother went hungry. The bread from the alley was long gone, dropped somewhere in the chaos. 3 days. Her mother hadn't eaten in 3 days. As false dawn began to gray the windows, Kale reappeared. He looked different in the softening light, not diminished, but somehow more present. She could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the precise way his hair fell across his forehead. He'd removed his coat entirely, dressed now in a simple white shirt that made his otherness more apparent, not less. No creature that beautiful had ever been human. You didn't rest, he observed. Neither did you. I don't require it the way you do. He crossed to the windows, drawing heavy velvet curtains across them with practiced efficiency. But dawn is coming. I'll be unavailable for several hours. If you need anything, Ring this. He placed a small silver bell on the desk. My day servant will attend to you. You have a human servant? Thomas has been with House Vex for 40 years. He's well compensated and free to leave whenever he wishes. He stays because the work suits him. Kale's hands moved across the curtains, checking their seal with meticulous care. Most old houses employ human servants. We need eyes in the daylight world, hands that can move when ours cannot. Elena watched the way he tested each curtain edge, the precision bordering on ritual. What happens if sunlight touches you? Nothing pleasant. He finished his inspection and turned back to her. The younger the vampire, the faster they burn. I'm old enough that I'd have perhaps 30 seconds before the damage became irreversible. Older than me, the true ancients can withstand minutes. But none of us can survive it indefinitely. How old are you? A pause. Old enough to remember when this city was a trading post. When your country was a collection of warring kingdoms. When the houses signed the first accord in blood and fire. The weight of years pressed down on the room. Elena tried to imagine it, centuries of nights, of watching humans live and die, of accumulating power and secrets while the world transformed around him. It was too vast to comprehend. The girl, Elena said, changing direction. Will she remember what happened? In fragments. Dreams that feel like memories. House Mordain will help her contextualize them. Kale's expression softened fractionally. You did well tonight. The choice you made. Not many humans would have chosen transformation over mercy death. I chose life. That's all. That's everything. He moved toward the door, then paused. Your mother. The room where she's staying. Give me the address. Elena's breath caught. Why? Because I keep my word. I said I'd help you get word to her. Thomas will deliver a message. Money for food and rent. Medicine. If she needs it, she'll know you're alive and safe. She'll ask questions. Where the money came from. Why? I'm not there. Thomas is skilled at evasion. Kale's hand rested on the doorknob. Write what you need to write. Leave it on the desk. He'll deliver it at midday. It was more than Elena had dared hope for. More than she'd thought possible when she'd stolen that bread a lifetime ago. Thank you. Kale inclined his head. Don't thank me yet. Tonight, we begin the real work. Uncovering what House Valois is planning. Why they've escalated their operations. What they want badly enough to risk council judgment. His eyes met hers across the dim room. It may require you to face things you'd rather forget. Your father's final days. The trial. The evidence that destroyed him. I've already faced those things every day for 6 months. Not like this. There was something almost gentle in his voice. Not with the knowledge that monsters pulled the strings. Not with the understanding that your pain was calculated, measured, inflicted with purpose. That changes grief into something sharper. Elena thought of her father's body swinging in the garden. Of her mother's broken spirit. Of the way their neighbors had turned away, ashamed to know them. Good, she said quietly. I want it sharp. Kale studied her for a long moment, and something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of shared damage. Of understanding that some wounds were meant to be weaponized. Dawn is here, he said finally. Sleep if you can. We have work ahead. He left, his footsteps fading into the depths of the house. Elena listened to the silence that followed, not empty, but full of old house sounds. Settling wood, distant water through pipes. The whisper of curtains in a draft she couldn't feel. She found paper and ink on the desk. Good quality, expensive. Her hand shook as she wrote. Mama, I'm safe. A situation has arisen, but I'm unharmed and sheltered. The man bringing this can be trusted with money for food and medicine. I'll return to you as soon as I'm able. The people who hurt father, I've found proof they lied. I'm going to make them answer for it. Please eat. Please rest. Please wait for me. I love you. Esh left the letter on the desk beside the silver bell. Then she curled into one of the leather chairs before the dying fire, wrapped in a dead man's shirt, and finally surrendered to exhaustion. Outside, dawn broke over Ashwick. Inside House Vex, a human girl slept in a vampire's library, and dreamed of justice written in blood. When she woke, afternoon light was seeping around the curtain edges, and a cup of tea sat steaming on the desk beside her. Letter gone now, delivered. A note in precise handwriting read, Your mother wept with relief. She ate. The medicine has been procured. Sleep well. Thomaselina held the note to her chest and wept herself. Grief and gratitude tangled too tightly to separate. The day passed slowly. Night would come again soon. Chapter 5. Blood and testimonial emerged with the darkness. Elena had spent the afternoon exploring the library, running her fingers along book spines in languages she couldn't read, studying maps that showed Ashwick divided into territories she'd never known existed. Thomas had brought her lunch simple, nourishing, and answered her careful questions with patient evasion. He was older, gray-haired, with kind eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. Lord Cale is fair, Thomas had said, when she'd asked what it was like to serve a vampire. More than most. He doesn't take what isn't freely offered. That matters in this world. Now the sun had set, the curtains drawn back to reveal windows black with night, and Cale stood in the doorway, looking like he'd been carved from the shadows themselves. Your mother received the message? He asked. Yes, thank you. Elena closed the book she'd been pretending to read, something about maritime trade routes. Thomas said she ate. That she's resting. Good. Cale moved to the desk, pulling out documents she recognized with a jolt of nausea. I retrieved these from the courthouse archives. Your father's trial records. The evidence presented against him. Elena's hands clenched in her lap. She'd avoided looking at these for months, couldn't bear to see her father's name attached to words like fraud and embezzlement. But Cale was already spreading them across the desk, his movements clinical, detached. The prosecution's case rested on 3 pillars, he said, pointing to different documents. Falsified shipping manifests, a private ledger showing hidden payments, and testimony from Marcus Holden, claiming your father had confessed to him. All lies. Elena's voice was tight, sophisticated lies. Cale tapped the ledger. This was created by someone with intimate knowledge of your father's business practices. The handwriting is expertly forged. Even I needed magnification to see the inconsistencies. But they're their pressure points in the ink, letter formations that vary from authentic samples by millimeters. He produced another document, this one covered in his own precise notes. The shipping manifests were altered after the fact. The dates don't align with title charts. Ships listed as departing on days when the harbor was closed for storms. Small details that the prosecution glossed over because the judges were already convinced. Elena stood, forcing herself to approach the desk, to look at the evidence that had killed her father. And Holden's testimony? The linchpin. Cale's finger traced a line in the transcript. He claimed your father confessed during a private meeting on August 14th. But your father was in London that day, meeting with investors. I have the hotel records, the signed register, witnesses who saw him 200 miles away from where Holden claimed they spoke. Then why didn't father's lawyers present that evidence? Because they never looked for it. Cale's eyes met hers, and she saw anger there, cold, controlled, ancient. House Valois influenced the defense. Not overtly. A word here, a suggestion there. They ensured your father's legal team was competent enough not to raise suspicion, but compromised enough to fail where it mattered. The room tilted. Elena gripped the desk's edge. They manipulated both sides. They orchestrated the entire performance. From the initial accusations to the verdict. Your father never had a chance. Cale gathered the documents into neat piles. What they didn't anticipate was his suicide. They'd intended him for prison, where they could extract information about shipping routes, harbor security, customs officials who could be bought. His death complicated their plans. Good. The word came out savage. I hope it ruined everything. It delayed them. Nothing more. Cale opened a different folder, this one containing newer documents, surveillance photographs, shipping schedules, financial records marked with House Valois seal. They've been rebuilding your father's network under Holden's name, using it to transport materials the houses need, blood preservation equipment, medical supplies for managing turned children, weapons forged with silver alloys. Elena stared at the photographs. Ships she recognized from her childhood, when her father would take her to the docks and teach her the names of every vessel. Now they served monsters. You said House Valois has destroyed 43 families. She looked up at Cale. Do you have proof? Records? I have 20 years of documentation. Names, dates, methods. Families ruined by scandal, bankruptcy, mysterious accidents. He pulled out a ledger bound in black leather. I've been tracking House Valois' human operations since they violated the Second Accord. The council knows I'm watching them. It's why they've grown bold enough to challenge me directly, by hunting in your territory, by hunting you specifically. Cale's expression turned grim. That child in the alley wasn't random bait. She was placed on your route home. House Valois knew you'd stop for her. They know you, Elena, your patterns, your compassion. They've been watching you since your father's death. Ice flooded Elena's veins. Why? Because your leverage. Kale moved around the desk, closing the distance between them. Your mother is ill, destitute, dependent on charity. House Valois has been positioning themselves to approach her, to offer assistance, medicine, money, protection in exchange for a small favor. What favor? Testimony that your father confessed his crimes to her before his death, that he expressed remorse, that he was, in fact, guilty. Kale's voice was soft now, almost gentle. It would close the case permanently, eliminate any possibility of appeal or investigation. And your mother, desperate to survive, to have means to search for her missing daughter, would likely agree. Elena's breath came short and sharp. The trap was elegant, cruel, perfectly designed to exploit every vulnerability they had left. They would have taken me tonight, she whispered, turned me or killed me, then approached my mother tomorrow, while she was fresh with grief. Yes, and you stopped them. I interrupted them. There's a difference. Kale's hand rose, hesitated, then fell back to his side, an aborted gesture of comfort. House Valois will try again. They'll send envoys, make threats, offer bargains. We need to move first. Present evidence to the council that forces them to withdraw. Evidence like what? Like your testimony. Kale's eyes held hers. You were there, Elena. You saw your father in the days before his death. You have access to his personal papers, his correspondence. Things the trial never examined because the defense was compromised. If we can establish that House Valois orchestrated the entire prosecution, the council will be forced to sanction them, and if they're sanctioned, their operations are frozen, their territory reduced, their hunting rights revoked for a decade or more. A cold smile touched Kale's mouth. It won't undo what they've done, but it will hurt them in ways that matter to immortals. Status, power, influence among the houses. Elena looked at the documents spread across the desk. Her father's life reduced to evidence. Her family's destruction catalogued in clinical detail. 20 years of names and dates and calculated cruelties. When do we present this to the council? She asked. 3 nights from now. They convene at the old cathedral. All 5 houses attend. Kale began gathering the documents. Until then, you stay here, safe behind wards. We prepare your testimony. Anticipate their counter-arguments. Build a case so airtight they can't deny it. 3 nights. Elena's hands steadied. Purpose was crystallizing inside her chest, sharp and clear as broken glass. Will it be enough time? It will have to be. Kale looked at her across the desk, and something flickered in his ancient eyes. Respect, perhaps, or recognition. You surprise me, Elena Thorne. How? You haven't asked what I want in return. She had asked in a way, but he was right. She hadn't pressed for details, hadn't demanded guarantees. Because I already know, she said quietly. You want House Valois weakened. You want justice for your territory. And somewhere beneath all that cold strategy, I think you want them punished for the 43 names in that ledger. Kale's expression didn't change, but the silence that followed felt like acknowledgement. We should begin, he said finally. There's much to review before the council convenes. Elena nodded. Outside, Ashwick's night streets hummed with life, human and otherwise. Somewhere in those shadows, House Valois was planning their next move, but inside House Vex, a girl who'd lost everything was learning to be dangerous. Chapter 6. The breaking Horthy worked through the night like scholars preparing for an examination that would determine more than grades. Kale spread documents across every surface in the library, the desk, the chairs, portions of the floor mapped out with testimony and evidence. He moved through them with the precision of someone who'd spent centuries organizing information, his hands sorting papers with inhuman speed, while his voice remained steady, explaining the intricate politics of the council. 5 houses, 5 votes, he said, pointing to a diagram he'd sketched showing the power structure. House Mordain typically sides with preservation of human vampire treaties. They'll support us if the evidence is sound. House Cres's is neutral to the point of paralysis. They abstain unless directly threatened. House Thorn. Elena's head snapped up from the shipping manifest she'd been studying. Like my name? A coincidence. House Thorn is one of the oldest bloodlines, named for the family that founded it in the 12th century. Kale's expression remained neutral, but something shifted in his tone. They control the Western territories, agricultural lands, mining operations. They're insular, traditional. They rarely involve themselves in disputes unless their territory is encroached upon. And House Valois? will lie with perfect conviction and expect their allied house to support them. Kale moved to stand beside her, looking down at the manifest. House Vex stands alone in this accusation. That's why your testimony matters. You're human, unaffiliated. Your grief is genuine. Your evidence drawn from personal knowledge. The council will have to acknowledge it. Elena traced her father's handwriting on the manifest, his real handwriting, not the forgery from the trial. Each letter was familiar, painful, proof of the man he'd been. What if they don't care? What if human lives just don't matter enough to them? Then we've lost. Kale's honesty was brutal. But I don't believe that will happen. The Accords exist because even immortals understand that sustainability requires balance. House Valois' methods threaten that balance. 43 families destroyed draws attention, creates patterns, makes humans suspicious, vengeful. It's bad for all the houses, so we're banking on their self-interest, always. Kale reached past her, pulling another document forward. His sleeve brushed her arm, and Elena felt the unnatural coolness of his skin through the fabric. This is your father's correspondence with Holden from the year before the trial. Read the last 3 letters. Notice anything? Elena forced herself to focus, scanning the neat script. Business discussions, shipping schedules, a request for Holden to review new insurance policies. Nothing remarkable until the tone changes, she said slowly. Here, in March, father's writing becomes more formal, careful. Because he suspected something, Kale leaned closer, his finger tracing a specific paragraph. This line, I trust you'll handle the discrepancies with your usual discretion. He's not asking Holden to be discreet. He's acknowledging that Holden already has been, that there have been problems Holden has quietly resolved, or quietly caused. Elena's pulse quickened. Father was testing him, watching to see how he'd respond. Exactly. And 2 weeks later, Holden began building the false evidence. Your father's suspicion triggered the timeline. They had to move before he discovered too much. Kale straightened, but didn't step away. If we can establish that your father was investigating irregularities before the accusations began, it undermines the prosecution's entire narrative. We need his private notes, his real ledger. Elena's mind raced. He kept everything locked in his study at home. After he died, the courts seized it all, but Mother saved some papers, personal letters, family documents. They might still be in our old house. The house was sold to cover debts, I know. But the new owners might not have cleared the attic. Father had a false panel behind the chimney breast. He showed me once, when I was a child. Said it was for keeping important things safe. She met Kale's eyes. If his real ledger survived, it would be there. Something dangerous flickered across Kale's face. Breaking into a private residence risks exposure. If we're caught, then we're careful. Elena surprised herself with her own boldness. You move like a shadow. I know the house's layout, every squeaking board and hidden corner. We go tomorrow night, retrieve the ledger before the council convenes, and if the panel is empty, then we present what we have. But if there's a chance, any chance of proving father was investigating Holden, we have to take it. Kale studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. The firelight caught the planes of his face, illuminating and shadowing simultaneously. He looked like something carved from stone and darkness, beautiful and terrible and wholly inhuman. You're committed to this, he said quietly, even knowing what the council chamber will be like. 5 ancient vampires, judging your testimony. House Valois representatives tearing apart your memories, your grief, anything they can use to discredit you. They already took everything. Elena's voice didn't shake. My father, my home, my mother's health, my reputation. What else can they do to me that hasn't already been done? Kill you. Kale's bluntness was almost kind. Turn you. Erase your memories and leave you alive but empty. There are fates worse than death, Elena. Many of them. Then help me make sure those fates find House Valois instead. The words hung between them, a pact sealed in something darker than blood. Kale's expression shifted, calculation giving way to something Elena couldn't quite identify. Respect, perhaps. Or recognition of a kindred damage. Tomorrow night, he said finally. We retrieve the ledger, but you follow my lead, my instructions. The moment I say we leave, we leave. Understood? Understood. Good. He moved away, gathering documents with brisk efficiency. For now, you need rest. The human body requires sleep, and you've had precious little of it. Elena wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at her bones. The adrenaline that had sustained her was fading, leaving her hollow and aching. What about you? I'll continue preparing. Dawn is still hours away. Cale paused at the door, glancing back. Your mother asked Thomas to tell you something. I told him it was inappropriate, but he insisted I relay it. Elena's breath caught. What did she say? That she's proud of you. That she knows you're doing something brave, even if she doesn't understand what. That she loves you. His voice was carefully neutral, but his eyes held something that might have been centuries-old memory of what such words felt like. Thomas thought you should hear it. Tears burned Elena's throat. Thank you for letting him tell me. Cale inclined his head and left, his footsteps fading into the house's deeper darkness. Elena stood alone in the library, surrounded by evidence of her father's destruction and plans for vengeance. She touched the manifest one last time, pressing her palm flat against her father's handwriting. I'm going to make them pay, she whispered to the empty room. I promise. The fire crackled its agreement. Outside, the night deepened toward the hour when even monsters rested, but Elena's work had only just begun. She climbed into the chair by the fire, pulled a blanket around her shoulders, and let her eyes close. Tomorrow, they would break into her childhood home. The day after, they would face the council, and somewhere in the shadows, House Valois was planning their own countermove. The game was accelerating. Soon, someone would have to surrender. Elena intended to make sure it wasn't her. Chapter 7. Ghosts in the Walls. House of Elena's childhood stood like a gravestone against the night sky. She hadn't been back since the day they'd been forced to leave 6 months ago, though it felt like centuries. The new owners had made changes, fresh paint on the shutters, new curtains in the windows, a garden that no longer bore the oak tree where her father had died. They'd cut it down, erased the evidence, made the house clean again. Elena stood in the shadows across the street, Cale beside her like a piece of living darkness. He'd dressed for stealth, black on black, his coat abandoned for fitted clothing that moved silently. His hand rested lightly on her shoulder, steadying her or restraining her. She wasn't sure which. The family is asleep, he murmured, his voice barely a breath. 2 adults. First floor bedroom. 1 child. Second floor. No dogs. No alarms beyond simple locks. How can you tell? Heartbeats. Breathing patterns. The way sound carries through walls when you've learned to listen for it. His fingers pressed gently against her shoulder. The attic window second from the left. Can you reach it from the elm tree? Elena studied the tree, its branches stretching toward the house like skeletal fingers. I used to climb out that way when I was 14. Sneak out to meet friends father didn't approve of. Did he catch you? Every time. A painful smile touched her lips. He'd be waiting in the hall, disappointed, but not angry. Said if I was going to rebel, I should at least be better at it. Cale's hand fell away. We go up the tree, through the window. The attic stairs will creak on the 3rd and 7th steps, avoid them. The panel is behind the chimney, north wall. You have to press the brick at shoulder height, then slide the panel left. Elena's hands clenched. Cale, if the ledger isn't there, then we leave. Quickly and quietly. No lingering. No ghosts. His eyes met hers, luminous in the darkness. Ready? She wasn't, would never be. But she nodded anyway. They moved like smoke across the street, Cale's hand finding hers to guide her through shadows she couldn't see. The elm tree's bark was familiar under her palms, rough and solid. She climbed with muscle memory, finding handholds she'd used 100 times, and Cale followed with inhuman grace, making no sound at all. The window gave with a soft protest. Elena slipped through into air that smelled wrong, different soap, different cooking, different lives occupying her memories. The attic was darker than she remembered, shapes transformed by the new family's storage. Boxes where her mother's trunks had been. Unfamiliar furniture casting unfamiliar shadows. Cale landed beside her without sound, his hand finding her elbow in the darkness. Which way? Elena oriented herself, pushing past the strangeness. The chimney was there, she could feel its residual warmth, see its bulk against the lesser darkness. She moved toward it, careful of her footing, avoiding the boards she knew had grown. The brick felt exactly as she remembered. Cold, slightly rough. She pressed at shoulder height, and nothing happened. Lower, Cale whispered. You've grown since you were last here. She adjusted, pressing again, and felt the brick give with a soft click. The panel slid aside, revealing a cavity in the wall barely larger than a bread box. Elena's hands shook as she reached inside, finding papers. A leather-bound book. A small wooden box. She pulled them out carefully, cradling them against her chest. Real, still here, preserved in darkness while her world collapsed around them. We need to go, Cale said, his voice tight with sudden urgency. Now. What? Someone's coming. Up the main stairs. Moving too fast for sleepwalking. His hand closed around her arm. The window. Move. Elena scrambled toward the window, but froze at the sound of footsteps pounding up the attic stairs. Not careful. Not quiet. The door burst open, and gaslight flooded the space. A man stood in the doorway, holding a lamp high. The new owner. His face twisted with fear and anger. Thieves. Margaret. Call the police. Cale moved faster than thought, placing himself between Elena and the man. We're leaving. No one needs to be harmed. You're in my house. The man's hand reached for something behind the door, a cricket bat, swinging forward with desperate strength. Cale caught it mid-swing, the wood splintering in his grip. The man's eyes widened, seeing something in Cale's face that transcended rational fear. His lamp fell, oil spilling across the floorboards. Run, Cale said softly. The man ran, his screams echoing down the stairs. Margaret, get William. And run. Get out of the house. Flames licked across the spilled oil, catching on old wood and stored boxes. The attic was a tinder box, and fire spread with terrifying speed. The window. Cale grabbed Elena, the papers still clutched against her chest, and threw her toward the opening. She caught the frame, pulling herself through as smoke began to fill the space. Behind her, Cale moved through the growing inferno like it was merely inconvenient. Batting flames aside, Elena hit the tree branch hard, nearly losing her grip. Below, she heard the family stumbling into the street, the man shouting for neighbors, for water, for help. Her house was burning. Cale landed beside her with impossible grace. Down, fast. Before they see us clearly, they descended in a controlled fall, hitting the ground as the first neighbors emerged from their homes. Cale pulled Elena into the shadows, his arm around her waist. Moving with speed that blurred the world, they didn't stop until they were 6 blocks away. Crouched in an alley, the sound of fire bells ringing behind them, Elena looked down at the papers in her arms. Smoke-stained but intact. Her father's handwriting visible on the leather cover of the ledger. She'd gotten what they came for, but her childhood home was burning. Another piece of her past turning to ash. I'm sorry, Cale said quietly. The lamp. If I'd moved faster, you saved me. Elena's voice was hollow. The house was already gone. It stopped being mine the day father died. This is just making it official. Cale's hand found her shoulder, a gesture of comfort that probably cost him something. Can you walk? We need to get back before House Valois hears about this. They'll know we're moving, that we have something worth burning down houses for. Elena nodded numbly. She clutched her father's ledger tighter and stood on shaking legs. Behind them, orange light painted the sky. Smoke rose like prayers or curses, and the past burned with a finality that hurt worse than she'd expected. But the ledger was real, solid, proof that her father had known, had fought, had left her the tools for vengeance. They walked through Ashwick's shadows, heading back toward House Vex, toward tomorrow night's council meeting, toward the confrontation that would determine whether her father's death meant anything at all. The fire bells followed them for miles. A funeral dirge for memories. Elena had already mourned once. She wouldn't mourn them again. There was no time left for grief, only justice remained. Chapter 8. What the ledger knew dawn was breaking when they returned to House Vex, the sky bleeding gray and pink over Ashwick's rooftops. Cale moved with visible urgency now, the approaching sun, a weight Elena could see in the tension of his shoulders. He'd pulled his coat tight, despite the lack of cold, shielding himself from even the indirect light. Inside, he said, practically pushing her through the door. Thomas was waiting, already drawing curtains with practiced efficiency. The study. Now, Elena followed him down corridors she was beginning to know, her arms still wrapped around her father's ledger and papers. Smoke clung to her clothes, acrid and accusing. Behind her eyelids, she kept seeing the house engulfed in flames, the new family running into the street. More collateral damage in a war she hadn't chosen. The study was smaller than the library, more intimate. A desk, 2 chairs, shelves lined with books that looked actually read rather than collected. Cale lit a lamp with steady hands and gestured for Elena to sit. Show me what we have. Elena placed the ledger on the desk with reverent care, then the loose papers, then the small wooden box. Her hands trembled as she opened the ledger to the first page. Her father's handwriting stared back at her, dated 2 years before his death, private accounts for family eyes only. Should anything happen to me, this is the truth. He knew, Elena whispered. Even then, he knew something was wrong. Cale pulled his chair close, his eyes scanning the pages with inhuman speed. Elena watched his expression change, subtle shifts that spoke of recognition, calculation, anger held under iron control. This is remarkable, he said after a long silence. Your father documented every irregularity. Missing cargo, ships rerouted without authorization, payments made to shell companies he couldn't trace. His finger traced a particular entry. Here, June 7th, 2 years ago. He notes that 3 shipments disappeared between London and Ashwick. Medical equipment listed on the manifests, but never delivered to the hospitals that ordered them. Medical equipment? Elena leaned closer, reading over his shoulder. For what? Blood preservation. Refrigeration units designed to keep tissue samples viable during transport. Cale's voice was grim. House Valois has been building a network. Not just for feeding, but for distribution. Selling preserved blood to younger vampires who can't hunt efficiently. Creating a black market that undermines the accords. He flipped through more pages, his movements growing more agitated. Your father tracked payments through 6 different countries. He identified buyers, documented prices. He was building a case against Holden without knowing the full scope of what he'd uncovered, because Holden wasn't working alone. He was working for House Valois. Elena's stomach turned. And when father got too close, they destroyed him before he could expose them. Cale sat back, running a hand through his hair in a gesture surprisingly human. This ledger proves everything. The trial was a sham. Holden was guilty of the exact crimes they accused your father of committing. And House Valois orchestrated it all. Elena opened the wooden box with numb fingers. Inside, she found letters, correspondence between her father and various shipping officials, harbor masters, customs agents, all marked with notes in his handwriting, highlighting discrepancies, asking questions that had never been answered. He was so careful, she said, her voice breaking. So methodical. And they killed him anyway. They killed him because he was careful. Because he was close to the truth. Cale's hand covered hers, a gesture that startled them both. His skin was cool, solid, steady. Elena, this changes everything. With this evidence, the council can't ignore what House Valois has done. Not just to your father, but to the accords themselves. They've been violating treaty law for years. Will it be enough? She looked up at him, at eyes that held centuries of accumulated cynicism. Really? Will vampires care that they murdered one human who got in their way? They'll care that House Valois has been profiting from illegal blood trade while the rest of the houses maintain the careful balance that keeps humans from organizing against us. Cale's thumb brushed across her knuckles, a touch so gentle it felt like an apology. Your father's death is tragic, but it's the symptom. This, he gestured to the ledger, this is the disease. And the council will have to excise it, or risk infection spreading to every house. Elena wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that her father's meticulous documentation would matter, that justice existed even in a world ruled by monsters. But hope felt dangerous, fragile, as the dawn light creeping around the curtain edges. What happens tonight? She asked. At the council meeting, you testify, present your evidence. I'll support your claims with my own documentation. Cale's hand withdrew, leaving cold in its wake. House Valois will attempt to discredit you. They'll call you a grief-stricken girl manipulated by House Vex for political gain. They'll argue your father's ledger could be falsified, that you have motive to lie. And the other houses? Mordain will likely support us. They've been pushing for stricter enforcement of feeding laws. CRESs will waffle. Thorn. He paused, something complicated crossing his face. Thorn is unpredictable. They respect evidence, but they also value stability. If they perceive this accusation as destabilizing, they might side with Valois to maintain the status quo, so we could lose. Even with proof, we could. Cale's honesty was brutal and kind simultaneously. But we could also win. Force House Valois into sanctions severe enough to cripple their operations for decades. Expose their crimes in a way that makes the human newspapers. That forces governmental inquiries. They've operated in shadows for too long. Sometimes the best weapon is light. Elena looked down at her father's ledger, at his careful handwriting documenting his own doom. He'd fought with the only weapons he had: evidence, logic, truth, and they'd hung him for it, but he'd left her his arsenal. And she had something he hadn't, a vampire willing to stand beside her. "I'm ready," she said. "Whatever they throw at me tonight, I'm ready." Kale studied her with an expression that might have been admiration or recognition of shared purpose. "There's one more thing. The council chamber is sacred ground. Ancient protections woven into the stone. Once you enter, you can't leave until the proceedings conclude. If House Valois decides to eliminate you rather than face judgment, they could order an attack the moment you step outside. Then we make sure I don't step outside alone. I'll be with you." But Elena, his hand found hers again, and this time the touch felt less like comfort and more like connection. Like acknowledgement of the precipice they stood on together. If something goes wrong, if they move against you, run. Don't try to fight. Don't try to be brave. Just run, and trust that I'll find you. What if you can't? Then Thomas has instructions to get you out of the city. Money, documents, a new identity. Kale's eyes held hers. "You'll survive, even if I don't." The words hung between them, heavy with implications neither was ready to examine. Elena squeezed his hand, feeling the inhuman strength tempered by impossible gentleness. "We'll both survive," she said. "We'll present the evidence. Force the council to act. And when it's done, House Valois will answer for every life they've destroyed, including your father's, especially my father's." Outside, the sun climbed higher. Kale's face was drawn, his skin almost translucent in the lamplight. He needed rest, needed the oblivion that came with daylight. "Sleep," Elena said softly. "I'll guard the ledger. Tonight, we finish this." Kale nodded slowly and stood, releasing her hand with visible reluctance. At the door, he paused. "Your father would be proud of you. The woman you've become despite everything they took." Then he was gone, leaving Elena alone with her father's final testament and the weight of what tonight would bring. Chapter 9. The night court. The old cathedral rose against the night sky like a prayer carved in stone and shadow. Elena had seen it before. Of course, everyone in Ashwick knew Stede Erasmus's, the ancient church that predated the city itself, but she'd never known what happened in its depths after dark. In chambers built beneath the sacred ground where the 5 great houses convened to judge their own, Kale stood beside her at the gates, dressed in formal black that made him look like nobility from a century past. He'd been silent during the carriage ride, his hands resting on the ledger they'd wrapped in oiled cloth, his eyes distant with calculation or memory. "Once we enter," he said quietly, "speak only when addressed. Answer truthfully, but don't volunteer information. The council isn't human court. They don't value emotional appeals. Only evidence. Only truth." "I understand." Elena's voice was steadier than her hands. She wore a dress Thomas had procured, simple, black, appropriate for mourning and testimony both. Her father's letters were tucked inside her bodice, pressed against her heart like armor. "House Valois will have representatives. Likely Lady Serafini. She's their diplomat, their reasonable face. Don't be deceived by her courtesy. She's 300 years old and has orchestrated more deaths than plague." Kale's jaw tightened. "If she offers you anything, apology, compensation, mercy, refuse. It's poison wrapped in silk." "What about the others? The other houses?" "Lord Mordain is ancient, fair but detached. He sees humans as children requiring protection, which can work in our favor. Lady Cres's is political to her core. Watch her reactions to gauge how the wind blows." "And House Thorne?" Kale's expression shuddered. "Lord Thorne is unpredictable. He values honor above all else. If he believes your father was honorable, he'll support us. If he suspects manipulation, he'll crucify us both." The gates opened without touch, groaning on hinges older than nations. A figure waited in the entrance, a vampire, clearly, beautiful and terrible in the way they all were. He wore robes of deep crimson, his face ageless and cold. "Lord Kale of House Vex," the figure intoned. "And guest. The council awaits." They descended. The stairs spiraled down into stone that predated the cathedral above, carved with symbols Elena didn't recognize. Torches burned in sconces, their flames unnaturally steady. The air grew colder with each step, heavy with age and power. At the bottom, doors of black iron stood open, revealing a chamber that stole Elena's breath. It was a courtroom built for immortals. 5 thrones occupied a raised dais, each carved from different stone: marble, obsidian, granite, jade, bloodstone. 4 were occupied. The 5th, positioned at the center, sat empty. The seat of House Vex, Kale murmured. I'll sit in judgment today, but I've recused myself from voting. Lord Mordain will preside. The vampire on the marble throne was impossibly old. Elena could see it in the way light seemed to move around him rather than touch him, in eyes that held the weight of millennia. This was Lord Mordain, ancient beyond comprehension. To his right, a woman draped in silver regarded them with calculating interest. Lady Cres's. To his left, a man built like a warrior, his features sharp as broken glass. Lord Thorn, and on the far end, beautiful as poisoned wine, sat Lady Serafini of House Valois. She smiled at Elena with teeth to white, to perfect. The council recognizes Lord Kale and his witness. Lord Mordain's voice resonated through the chamber like distant thunder. State your grievance. Kale stepped forward, the ledger in his hands. I bring accusation against House Valois. Violation of the Second Accord, Article 4, prohibited manipulation of human legal systems for house profit. Murder of a human under false pretenses. Conspiracy to traffic in illegal blood trade across international borders. The chamber went utterly silent. Lady Serafini's smile never wavered. Bold accusations, Lord Kale. I trust you have evidence beyond your house's well-known animosity toward ours? I have documentation, testimony, and this. Kale placed the ledger on a pedestal that rose from the floor. The private records of Edmund Thorn, shipping merchant, murdered 6 months ago by House Valois machinations. Thorn? Lord Thorn's head snapped up, his eyes fixing on Elena with sudden intensity. The girl is a Thorn? Elena Thorn, Kale confirmed. Daughter of the murdered man, here to testify to her father's character and the evidence he compiled before House Valois destroyed him. A human child testifies before the council? Lady Serafini's voice dripped with amused contempt. What credibility does she possess? What understanding of our world, our laws, our necessities? She possesses the truth. Kale's voice cut like steel. Something House Valois fears more than sunlight. Lord Mordain raised a hand, silencing the chamber. The girl will speak. We will listen. Then we will judge. His ancient eyes found Elena's. Approach. Child, tell us what you know. Elena's legs moved before her mind caught up, carrying her to the center of the chamber. 5 sets of inhuman eyes fixed on her, predatory, curious, calculating. She was prey, standing before apex predators, armed with nothing but words and her father's dying legacy. My father was innocent, she began, her voice echoing in the stone chamber. The crimes he was accused of: fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. He didn't commit them, but someone did. His business partner, Marcus Holden, was stealing from Thorn Shipping for years, using our routes to transport illegal goods. Selling information to House Valois. Lies, Lady Serafini said smoothly. The trial was public. The evidence conclusive. Your father was found guilty by human courts, human judges. Are you suggesting they were all wrong? I'm suggesting they were manipulated. Elena pulled the letters from her bodice, holding them up. My father documented every irregularity, every missing shipment, every payment that didn't make sense. He was building a case against Holden when House Valois decided he was too dangerous to let live. And you have proof of this claim? Lord Thorn leaned forward, his interest sharp as a blade. His ledger. 2 years of careful investigation. Shipping manifests that prove he was in London when Holden claimed they met. Harbor records showing impossible departure dates. Financial documentation connecting Holden to shell companies owned by Elena. Took a breath, steadying herself. Owned by House Valois fronts. She laid it all out. Every page of her father's ledger. Every letter. Every piece of evidence that Kale had corroborated with his own investigation. She spoke with her father's voice in her head, methodical and precise, letting the facts build their own case. Lady Cres's began taking notes. Lord Thorn's expression grew darker. Even Lord Mordain's ancient face showed something that might have been concern. Only Lady Serafini remained unmoved, her smile fixed like a death mask. Fascinating, she said, when Elena finished. A tragic story beautifully told. But it proves nothing, except that a grieving daughter will invent any conspiracy to absolve her father's crimes. The ledger is authentic, Kale said from his throne. I've had it examined. The ink dates correctly. The handwriting matches authenticated samples. And every claim Edmund Thorn made can be verified through independent records, which you've conveniently compiled. Lady Serafini rose, graceful as a serpent. Lord Kale, your hatred of House Valois is documented. You've opposed us for decades. This is simply another attempt to undermine our position, using a traumatized child as your weapon. Then examine the evidence yourself, Kale challenged. Send neutral investigators to verify every claim. If we're lying, expose us. But if we're telling the truth, then House Valois has committed crimes against the Accords. Lord Mordain's voice silenced them all. Crimes that carry severe sanctions. Lady Serafini's smile finally cracked. The council wouldn't dare. The council will do what justice demands. Lord Thorne stood, his hand slamming against his throne. I am House Thorne. That name means something. Honor, integrity. And this girl, he pointed at Elena, carries it. I can see it in her bearing, hear it in her words. Her father was one of us in spirit, if not in blood. Elena's heart lurched. One vote. They had one vote, but they needed three, and outside the chamber, in the darkness of Ashwick's streets, something was moving, something that didn't intend to let testimony conclude. Chapter 10. Blood Oath. Explosion came from above. Stone dust rained from the ceiling as the chamber shook, ancient foundations groaning. The torches flickered, and Elena heard screams from the upper levels, human screams. Cathedral staff caught in whatever attack House Valois had unleashed. Breach. The crimson-robed vampire who'd led them down burst through the doors. House Valois forces. There he never finished. A blade pierced his chest from behind, and he crumpled like a puppet with cut strings. Behind him stood vampires Elena didn't recognize, wearing the silver and black of House Valois. 20 of them, 30, more pouring through the entrance. So much for sacred ground, Lady Serafini said, her voice utterly calm. The council has become too weak, too beholden to outdated laws. House Valois will no longer submit to judgment by those who don't understand the necessities of survival. This is madness. Lord Mordain rose, power radiating from him like heat. You attack the council itself? Start a war between the houses? We finish what should have ended 6 months ago. Lady Serafini's eyes fixed on Elena. The girl dies. The evidence burns. And House Vex learns the price of interference. Kale moved faster than thought, crossing the chamber to place himself between Elena and the advancing vampires. You'll have to go through me. That can be arranged. Lady Serafini gestured. And 10 vampires lunged forward. What followed was chaos. Kale fought like a force of nature. His movements too fast to track, each strike precise and lethal. Lord Thorne leaped from his throne, a sword appearing in his hands from nowhere, cutting through Valois vampires with brutal efficiency. Even Lord Mordain moved, his ancient power manifesting as raw force that sent attackers flying, but there were too many. And Lady Cres's remained seated, calculating, watching to see which side would prevail before committing. Elena clutched her father's ledger, backing toward the wall. A Valois vampire broke through the defenders, reaching for her with hands that ended in claws. She swung the ledger like a weapon, catching him across the face. He laughed and Kale was there, breaking the vampire's neck with a single twist. The door behind my throne, he gasped, already turning to face new attackers. It leads to the catacombs. Run, get to the street. Find Thomas. I'm not leaving you, you're the evidence. Blood ran from a cut on Kale's cheek, black in the torchlight. If you die, this was all for nothing. Go. Lord Thorne appeared beside them, his sword dripping. I'll cover her escape. Go, girl. Your father didn't die so you could join him tonight. Elena ran. Behind her, the sounds of battle echoed through stone screams and breaking bones and the terrible wet sounds of violence. She clutched the ledger and sprinted through the door behind Kale's throne, finding herself in tunnels that stretched into darkness. She ran blind, one hand trailing the wall, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind her, footsteps, pursuing, getting closer. The tunnel opened into a vast catacomb, walls lined with skulls that watched her with empty eyes. Elena stumbled, fell, the ledger, sliding across ancient stone. She scrambled for it as a figure emerged from the tunnel. Lady Serafini, unhurried, immaculate despite the chaos. Did you really think you could outrun me, child? I'm 300 years old. I've hunted prey across continents. Elena's hand closed on the ledger. My father documented everything. Even if you kill me, Kale has copies. The truth will come out. Truth is whatever the powerful say it is. Lady Serafini advanced with predatory grace. Your father learned that lesson too late. You're about to learn it at exactly the right time, the moment before you die. She's not dying tonight. Kale emerged from a side passage, battered and bleeding but alive. Behind him came Lord Thorne, supporting Lord Mordain, who looked diminished but determined. They formed a line between Elena and Lady Serafini, 3 against 1. Lady Serafini smiled. I'll take those odds, 2 against 3, Lady Cress said, stepping from another tunnel. She moved to stand beside Lady Serafini, her neutrality finally abandoned. House Cress sides with strength. House Valois has demonstrated it tonight. The odds had shifted. Elena could see it in Kale's face, the calculation, the grim acceptance of what was coming. Elena, he said quietly, behind Lord Mordain, there's a passage that leads to the old cemetery. Go, now. No, the word surprised her as much as them. No more running. She stood, the ledger clutched against her chest, and faced the 5 immortal beings who held her life in their hands. You want to kill me? Fine. But you'll have to do it in front of Lord Mordain and Lord Thorn. Make them witnesses to how House Valois handles inconvenient truths. Show them exactly what you are. We're survivors, Lady Serafini hissed. We do what's necessary. You're murderers. Elena's voice rang through the catacombs. You killed my father because he was good, because he was honorable, because he threatened your prophets. And now you're trying to kill me for the same reason. Because the truth is inconvenient. Because justice threatens your power. She turned to Lord Mordain. You're ancient. You've seen centuries pass. Is this what you want the houses to become? Is this the legacy you're building? Where the strong crush the weak, where evidence doesn't matter, where honor is just a word. Lord Mordain's eyes closed. When they opened, they blazed with power that made the air itself tremble. Enough. The word shook the catacombs. Everyone froze. I have seen enough, heard enough. Lord Mordain straightened, ancient power flooding back into his frame. House Valois, you stand accused. The evidence is compelling. Your response attacking the council itself is confession. I vote for immediate sanctions. Dissolution of your territory. Revocation of your house seat. I second, Lord Thorn said immediately. That's only 2 votes, Lady Cress said nervously. The motion fails. I abstain from my own vote, as stated, Kale interrupted. But the girl testifies true. I witnessed Edmund Thorn's trial. Saw the manipulation. The evidence presented tonight is authentic. If my voice carries any weight with this council, I say House Valois has violated every principle we claim to hold sacred. Silence stretched. Lady Cress's face was pale, calculating furiously. House Cress's votes. For sanctions, she said finally. Immediate and severe. 3 votes. It was done. Lady Serafini screamed, a sound of pure rage, and lunged for Elena. Kale caught her mid-leap, bearing her to the ground. They rolled across stone, supernatural strength against supernatural fury. Lord Thorn moved to help, and then Lord Mordain. And Elena couldn't see what happened in the tangle of bodies and shadows. When it ended, Lady Serafini lay broken on the catacomb floor, and Kale stood over her, his chest heaving. It's done, Lord Mordain said quietly. House Valois is dissolved, their assets seized, their vampires scattered to other houses or exiled. The human authorities will receive anonymous evidence regarding Marcus Holden. Justice, such as we can provide it, is served. Elena's legs gave out. She sat hard on the cold stone, the ledger still pressed against her heart, and finally let herself cry. Epilogue 3. Months later, Elena stood at her mother's bedside in a clean, warm room that smelled of medicine and hope. The money from House Vex compensation, Kale called it, though it felt like more had paid for proper doctors, proper treatment. Her mother was recovering, slowly but genuinely. You look different, her mother said, studying Elena's face. Stronger. I feel different. Elena smiled, squeezing her mother's hand. Father's name has been cleared. The newspapers printed retractions. Holden is in prison. We're safe. And the man who helped you, Lord Kale? Elena's smile turned complicated. He's occupied. Council business. Restructuring House Valois' former territories. She didn't mention the letter in her pocket. The one that had arrived last night, written in Kale's precise hand. When your mother is well. When you've had time to heal. If you wish it, House Vex has a place for you. Not as a servant. Not as prey. As something unprecedented. A human who walks between worlds. A voice for those who can't speak in council chambers. An ally, if you choose to be. The choice is yours. It will always be yours. Helena looked out the window at Ashwick's streets, where humans and vampires shared the night in an uneasy balance she now understood. Where her father's death had meant something. Where justice, however imperfect, had been won. She thought about Kale's offer, about the world she'd glimpsed in those desperate days, about the work that remained 43 families who deserved the same justice she'd claimed for her own. Mama, she said slowly, when you're stronger, I need to tell you about something. An opportunity. It's dangerous and strange, and not at all what we planned for my life, her mother's. Eyes sparkled with something Elena hadn't seen in months. Curiosity, interest, life. Tell me everything, her mother said. So Elena did, and in the shadows of House Vex, Kale stood at his window, watching the city and waiting to see if the girl who'd changed everything would choose to walk back into the darkness, this time on her own terms.